You got the notification? Yep. All right, we're recording now.
Yep.
Okay. So for the audience that doesn't know you, introduce yourself, please.
My name is John Boseak, and uh, my claim to shame, I guess, would be I from 2005, approximately 2005 to 2010, I manufactured and distributed roughly $4.5 million worth of fraudulent credit cards via the internet.
So where did the money go in the end? Was it all just seized?
You know, a lot of it was just lost. It wasn't seized. It was just in bank accounts, because when the feds, the Secret Service rather, collected all of my hard drives, laptops, everything, I lost all of the account numbers, routing numbers, all of the, identities, the social security numbers, names that I had used to open those accounts. Everything was gone, lost. And it wasn't, specifically wasn't seized by the government. It was just lost, pretty much.
So what exactly, and I wanted to ask Cox this question because I never got to know exactly what Cox spent his money on. So what did you spend your money on exactly?
For me, it was mostly vacations and just living expenses. I wasn't like a really big, I wasn't like a flashy guy. I wasn't in the club popping bottles, and I didn't have $1 million in jewelry, and I wasn't driving, Ferraris and Lamborghinis or anything like that. I lived very humbly. I had a new townhouse. And I had all of the best furniture you could buy, $7,000 leather sofas. I had the biggest TV they sold at Best Buy. I had the PS3 or PS4 or whatever it was at that time. And then I didn't go grocery shopping for 4 or 5 years. I just ate out 3 times a day, every single day, whatever I wanted. I traveled a lot. I used a lot of it for traveling. I would travel from the East Coast to West Coast, a lot out to California. I got family in Michigan, so I was constantly, just traveling in Michigan. And when the money's coming in like this, you're not really focusing on what you're spending. I didn't live by a budget. I didn't, I would fill up my gas tank in my car and just drive and fill it up. I would fill up friends' gas tanks in their cars. I lent a lot of money out to people that I felt needed it. It just goes, man. It goes. It doesn't, when you're not saving anything, like I wasn't saving anything, because I was in my early 20s at this point, and I didn't have any kind of concept of like investing money. I didn't understand real estate. I didn't understand the stock market. I didn't understand, opening a small business. I had no concept of any of this. I was basically just a kid with a bunch of money, essentially.
Well, so you mentioned that your son
Mhm.
is as old as me, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so let's do the math on this. If you said you're 40, correct?
I'll be 40 in February. Yeah.
So I mean you had your first kid when you were 23.
Uh, yeah, my son. Actually, I had a daughter. I have a little girl too. I had when I was 17. But I don't have any contact because I was 17 years old. The girl was 23. Her parents just was like, this isn't happening, and they basically took the kid from her and then raised it. Her parents raised my daughter, and so I really haven't had any contact with her. She's never tried to contact me or anything. I don't even think she knows who I am, to be honest with you. But yeah, so I was 17 when she was born, so now she'd be like 23 or 24. So, but yeah, my son Nicholas, who's 17 now, he was born in, I don't know what, '08, I think, 2008,
Well,
two thousand seven.
I was born in 2006, but late 2006. So if we're talking about
He was born in March of '07.
okay, so that checks out. Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
March
Okay,
of
because if it's
'07.
because I'm going to be 18 this year, so I'm going to be a legal adult this year.
Yeah,
But
right.
yep, I don't know if I'm able. Well, what does that entail? So I would be able to vote. I don't know about buying a gun though. I
You
think
can you can buy a gun when you can buy a rifle when you're 18. Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
But I am not allowed to smoke. I don't think I'm allowed to drink. I am allowed to
No,
gamble, but not at a casino.
not at a casino, right? Yeah, I think lottery. I think you can play the
Yeah.
lottery. Yeah.
Well, the rule is you can't gamble at a casino because they serve alcohol when you're 18.
Okay. I was going when I was 19. I was going to Canada, going to the casino in Windsor.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, the rules there are different. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
like, yeah, because Canada, I think there's a like,
19. 19.
yeah,
It's everything. Drink,
right,
gamble, smoke,
right.
everything.
19,
Yeah,
yeah, 19 is their 21,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah, no. So ultimately, since you were getting millions of dollars being this, credit card fraudster, my question is,
Hmm.
where did you get this information? Like, where were you buying it off of like another person, and then,
Hmm.
or were you like getting it, like, were you hacking into these websites yourself?
In what context? When I was selling cards, or when I was in stores using them?
Well, there's two parts of your story. So, like, the way I understand it is you at one point were just buying people's credit cards, and then this was again for context of everybody that wasn't listening to our prior conversation. This is well before the era of Bitcoin. So,
We're talking early 2000s. Like when I first started,
yeah,
I started in probably 2003, 2004. When I initially got into carding, I was just doing online stuff, because in my haste to pay my student loan debts is basically what all this came out of. I was buried in student loan debts because I went to the Art Institute. I got my associate's degree in graphic design. I was there for like 3 years, and I was just buried in student loan debt, And so when I got online and I started researching ways to make money illegitimately, I just stumbled across carding forums. And like you said, back in the day, this was before the Silk Road. This was before Onion Router and the dark web. None of that even existed. So it was basically just carding forums. For anybody that doesn't know what carding forums, it was basically just like a Reddit page, but for fraud. And you could go and then people would just post threads. And you would, one would be on like bank fraud, one would be on money laundering, one would be on credit card fraud. So you could read about these things, and I just, I soaked it all up. I got on the forums and I just read as much as I could, and you pick up little things here and there, and then they have a section on these forums where there's vendors, where you can actually go to these sections and purchase credit card numbers, people's information, logins for banks, what have you. And that's where initially I had got the information from. So when I started, like I said, when I first got into it, I was just doing online stuff, So I would order what's called a full. It's FULLZ as a terminology. And what it is, it basically is somebody's first name. Well, an easier way to explain this is when hackers hack these servers and they gain access to this information, uh, it all depends on which server they access. Now, let's say they hack into a like a used car dealership, whatever information they gain access to, it's whatever information you went to the car dealership and gave them when they were running a credit check on you. So sometimes it would be first name, last name, date of birth, um, where they're employed at, their home address. I would only get that information. Now, other times, depending on where the information was hacked from, sometimes they would access a server, and that information would have a credit card attached to it. So it would be basically just the information that's on the front of the physical card, the credit card number, the date of birth, or the expiration date, and the little 3-digit security code from the back of the card. Now, armed with just this information alone, I could go online and I could just make purchases, have those purchases mailed to an address, and then, collect the goods, resell them for a profit. And was where I got involved into the whole carding scene. That's where I started, essentially. And
right,
it progressed from there. Yeah.
right. So yeah, so what I was getting at before was when you eventually went into the
When
pickaxe
I,
selling industry. Uh,
right when I was doing in-store carding, you mean?
well, my question is eventually then you, because I remember one of the comments you made was, why would you want to be the guy mining gold when you could sell a pickaxe,
Right,
right?
right.
So,
But
so
I didn't come to that conclusion until, maybe a year or two into what I was doing. Like that didn't come almost all the way until the end. Yeah.
right. So my question about that was when it came to um, selling the credit card information yourself, right?
Hmm.
Where did you exactly get it? Because the way that I um like there was this guy, I think his name was Albert Gonzalez. He was like the biggest credit card fraudster in like history, like $150 million. And the way I understand it, and like I've listened to Darknet Diaries like before this podcast, like kind of understand a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of these guys will hack into the actual companies themselves. They'll use like employee data, and then
Sure.
they'll get to the actual website, and then they'll steal like and that's not, I wouldn't, from like the way I've seen it, it's not really that sophisticated. But when they do it, that's like they're hacking into it. They're like actually getting the company's information and
Mm-hmm.
then doing it themselves. Other people will just outsource, okay, well, let me just try and find the actual data itself and buy it. So were you just buying the data and then reselling it?
I was just selling the physical card itself. Like I wasn't even selling the numbers or anything. I was just selling counterfeit plastic. I figured out how to make the plastic, and I figured out how to make it really good. Like my plastic was indistinguishable from that was issued from a financial institution. So once I got really good at that, then I realized I had a marketable product, so to speak. And I was thinking like, well, this takes all the risk out of everything, because now I don't have to go into the stores and risk putting my face on cameras and buying laptops and reselling everything online. Now I have, like I said, a marketable product that I could take to the forums and try and establish myself as a vendor, which is that's what eventually made me the most money. Yeah, but no, I wasn't selling the numbers. Like I had vendors that I worked with, that I could point my customers to the right direction. Like, if you need dumps is what they're called. It's the information that's encoded to the magnetic strip on the credit card. I had, vendors that I could refer people to for that, but solely my product was just the plastic itself. Yeah.
So ultimately, after doing this, like after doing this whole scheme for however many
Mhm.
years, like what was your biggest regret, like in all of this?
Moving to South Carolina. That's what got me caught. Yeah. But
Well, what? Yeah, go on.
no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so the entire time, like, at what point does the FBI and Secret Service actually become aware of you? Because eventually they do, but like there were points in the story when you're selling it like online, you're getting it online and you're just like ordering it to like an abandoned house or whatever, or wherever, whatever place basically,
Mhm.
and then you're picking it up from there, and then you're reselling it on eBay or wherever.
Right. So
But
I don't think I aroused any suspicion doing any of that stuff. Like I don't think that they were even aware of any of that until I actually started making plastic and selling plastic. Because right when I got into vending plastic, there was a couple of big cases going on at the time in the country. One was a couple of guys they busted out in Las Vegas, which eventually became a book called Kingpin. It was Christopher Aragon and Max Max Butler and Christopher Aragon, and they were two guys out west, and they were basically had teams of people that were making credit cards, and they had teams of people going out into stores, buying high ticket items and reselling it. They had just got busted, and at the same time, the FBI were conducting something called Operation Open Market, where they were systematically infiltrating every carding forum and taking down the admin and all of the vendors on each carding forum. And it's my belief that this is where they became kind of aware of my operation and what I was doing, because now I don't have any evidence to back this up, but I believe that for a very short period of time, I may have been the single largest distributor of fraudulent credit cards in the entire country that I know of. And so I believe that the Secret Service, I was a part of Operation Open Market, but due to me getting caught at this UPS store, I think kind of saved me from, becoming one of the indictments on that case. So, I think that the Secret Service had been purchasing cards from me online. But they just didn't know who I was specifically or where I was located. Yeah.
well, now post this terror operation, in terms of like moral regrets, like the regrets that you have about it all, right?
Oh well, I was a reckless young guy. I was a young kid, reckless at that time, and just I grew up on the streets. in and out of youth homes and boot camps and pretty much every program you could possibly imagine between the age of about 13 and 19. I was incarcerated maybe 10 months out of every single year. Like I would get out of a program, I'd make it 2 months, and I'd go right back into a program. So my thought process at this time, I didn't have a lot of empathy, for my fellow man. I didn't care. I didn't really care about screwing people over or, stealing people's money, because I just didn't care. My moral compass, I just wasn't there, at this time. But since then, obviously I've grown, I've matured, and I do realize what I did was wrong, you know. But as far as like, having regrets, moral compass. Yeah. As you get older, you'll realize that a lot of the mistakes you've made over the years are just, part of the human experience. I mean, obviously, aside from like, seriously things like, killing people and doing all kinds of other crazy stuff. I think a lot of things are just, it just comes with the, experience of kind of just growing up and figuring out who you are and figuring out your place in the world and how you interact with the world. And, you know, I, like I said, I didn't have any like direct victims. Like I didn't victimize people directly. Now, did some people suffer indirectly from my actions? Of course, but I think because I didn't actually deal with the victims myself, or I didn't actually directly victimize people, it's kind of easier for me to kind of deal with what I've done, if that makes any sense.
Well, one thing, so a lot of the justification that bank robbers, for example, have is that they are not stealing directly from anybody. It's not like a mugging where you're pointing a gun at somebody and they're like, "Give me your money," right?
Right.
Because then you're directly taking from the person. A lot of the justification that bank robbers and people that steal from big companies have, mainly from banks, is that they're really just stealing from the insurance companies because the
Right.
banks are federally insured, and then you're generally safe, especially if it's a credit card, because for the most part, banks will side with the person and say, hey, if you say like, hey, my card got frauded, okay, we'll freeze it, we'll give you back the money, we'll do a short investigation, and it's not a victimless crime. I don't want to say that because it still inconveniences people,
Hmm.
but it's not as was that the justification that you had basically, as like the bank robbers do, where like, did you ever justify to yourself in that sense at least?
Mm, I no, I'm not gonna try and like sugarcoat it. I just didn't care. I was a sociopath. I just didn't care who I was hurting. There was no justification. I never tried to be like, oh, it's just not that bad. I'm just like, I don't care, kind of. You know. Obviously
Right.
now I understand that model of thinking isn't right. But at that time, that was my train of thought. Yeah.
Right. Was there anybody that you are aware of that directly was harmed by your actions?
No, no, there was never one person came forward in court. I had no victims. When I went to court, I finally got sentenced. I had no restitution to pay back because there were, no victims. Yeah, so I don't, like I said, I don't know, like I said, I don't have any face to face, victims that that I victimized. I was just basically just selling cards online. It wasn't like I was selling people's information because I wasn't selling like social security numbers. I wasn't selling people's actual credit card information or none of that. I was just selling a blank piece of plastic, you know?
Well, now going on to the fact that, I mean, if we're going to your early childhood, right? I remember
Sure.
one thing that you noted was that you didn't really, I mean, you had a dad that was in the picture, but not in the picture, like in the sense of in your day to day life,
No,
right?
he wasn't actively,
Yeah.
neither one of my parents were really actively involved
Right.
in my life.
Well, with regards to that now, since you are a dad, how do you raise your kids, right? Like, do you try to instill any type of different morals, or are they just aware that you did it and like not to follow in that path, or
I've been blessed. I have good kids. My son, he's a good kid. He's not a troublemaker. He doesn't, do things dishonest. He's afraid to break the law or to like break rules. He's rather just do things the right way. Which I had no hand in that, to be honest with you. That's how his mother raised him like that, and I just try and give him good advice. I try and steer him in the right direction. I try and, just help him see that, what options are available to him in the future to kind of, guide his life in the right direction. But, I let him make all, I let them make all their own decisions. They make their own decisions, and I try to kind of guide their moral compass a little bit. But other than that, it's just, I'm kind of like hands off, and, because like I said, I don't have bad kids. It'd be completely different if he was always in trouble and going to jail, and then I would have to be more involved with the process. But I just, I just let him do his thing, and if he needs advice, I'll give him advice. Or if I see that he's doing something that's gonna, not turn out good for him in the future, I'll talk to him about it. But yeah.
Are so now going from, how you're raising your kids and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
And going on to like your career choice. From my understanding, you're a tattoo artist now.
I am, yeah. I just do YouTube and tattoo now. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, it from what I've seen, like you do a little bit of the YouTube stuff, like kind of like how Cox did it, right, when he got out of prison. Because he only got out of prison like 5 years ago, I discovered.
Yeah,
When I
yeah.
did my interview with him. Because because you guys went to the same prison, which is how you met. Were
Hmm.
you out of prison before him or after him?
What do you mean? Oh, no, no. I got out
Right.
before him. Yeah, yeah. No, he got
Yeah.
out 2019. I got out 2015, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. So I would have still been in second grade when you got out of prison.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I went back. So
How
he's been
come?
out. I got out, and I was just in a bad situation when I got out. When I got out of prison, I didn't have anything or anybody. So when I went into prison, I was married. And when I got out of prison, my wife was living at her parents' house with some other dude. She has some other dude living there with her. You know what I mean? So that was supposed to be my support fucking network when I got out, and that was just non-existent. And I don't have any family that'll loan me money or let me come live at their house or help me out with anything. So I was thrown into the halfway house. I had 6 months in halfway house to save money to buy an apartment or to get an apartment to get back on my feet. And the halfway house takes 30% of your gross income, before taxes and everything. you know so when I got out of halfway house, I was only able to get into like a very, very small kind of studio apartment. It was crazy. I had to wake up at 4 in the morning and walk 2 miles and catch a train an hour and then another bus another hour to go and make like $9 an hour, working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and barely being able to pay my bills. I finally just threw my hands up and decided to do fraud again, because I was literally starving to death. Literally, I was starving to death. I had money to keep the lights on, keep my phone on, and get back and forth to work, but I didn't have any money for food. You know what I mean? Like I had to pay my rent. I just barely was making it. So I started doing credit card fraud again. Got caught up within like 6 months. It was like set of unfortunate circumstances, and I went on the run. I took off, went out to Nebraska, got caught in Nebraska. They had to extradite me from Nebraska all the way back to South Carolina, where I went to court. It was like this whole thing was like a 9 month ordeal, which ended up working in my favor because I did 9 months on violation. But when I went back in front of the judge, I was supposed to serve 3 years probation, but she just killed my paper because she basically told me that I was unsupervisable because I kept taking off. And you know what are you going to do? I was a first time offender at this point because when I went to prison, I had never really been in trouble as an adult. I had a very eventful youth. You know what I mean? I'm in and out, but as an adult, I didn't really, I had no felonies. I had never really been to jail, never been to prison. So the very first thing I got caught and went to jail for, it sent me to federal prison straight away. But it wasn't, but on paper, I wasn't a career criminal. So it wasn't like she was just going to keep throwing me back in prison, throwing me back in prison. She just terminated my probation, you know, and I've been free ever since.
So, you know, with regards to you committing fraud again, were you caught because like you were being monitored or?
No, I was I had linked up with a guy that I was dating his sister in the halfway house. She was in the halfway house as well. And then so I, met her brother, and then her brother found out what I used to do. And then, through conversation, he's like, well, how easy is it to, this, that, and the other? I was like, well, listen, I don't want anything to do with it, but I'll show you how to do it pretty much. You order the equipment. I'll show you how to set it up. I'll show you how to run it. Just give me a little bit of money, so I'm not struggling. And that was the deal we had. One thing led to another. Things started getting mailed all around. I told them not to mail anything to my address. They ended up mailing a few things to my address. One of the things they mailed to my address was I had a vendor in China that manufactured the holograms that go onto the credit cards. And not only that, they manufactured the holograms that go on the driver's licenses, the multi-spec holograms. And each state, it's different for each state, but I would get them in like this 0.01 mil sticky film that would stick onto the driver's license after you printed it. So it would look like a laminate, so that it would pass, security verification. And lo and behold, that shit gets caught at customs. And two DHL drivers showed up at my door in Miami, knocking at my door. And I looked through my peephole and I seen the little package they had in their hand. And if you've ever ordered anything from China, China puts this yellow tape, this distinctive yellow tape on all of their packages they ship from China. No US supplier uses that tape. So when I seen the package in their hand, I seen it had the yellow tape on it. So my brain quickly did the math and I realized what was going on. Now, when they came into my apartment, I didn't have anything there. I had no printers, no laptops, no cards, no nothing. I almost had them. I almost had them convinced that it wasn't me, that they just had they came to the wrong address, pretty much. While they're in my kitchen, the UPS driver shows up with a giant box. So they go outside, they talk to the UPS driver and the FedEx driver, and they were like, the FedEx driver's like, oh yeah, I've delivered multiple packages here for him, and he's signed for them. I was screwed right then. So they came back in, they opened the box up. What's in the box? A giant automatic embossing machine that embosses and tips credit cards. Screwed right there. I was hit, you know. So I had to spill the beans pretty much and you kind of cooperate a little bit with them. And they let me go because I threw the other dude underneath the bus. You know what I mean? Like there's no shame in my game. I don't even give a shit. Like I just got out of prison. I just got out. And I'm like, I don't know this guy. He's not my homeboy. We didn't grow up together. I don't really know you. I told you not to send stuff to my address. You sent stuff to my address. You brought the police to my house. Now I got to throw you underneath the bus because I'm not going back to jail for your stupidity. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care about the whole snitching culture. Like, I'm not a gangster. I'm not a drug dealer. I don't live in that world. So I don't really care. I'll tell on whoever I need to tell on to keep myself out of jail. If it's, within reason. Obviously, I'm not going to go tell on my mom and dad or my brother or any of my friends. But if I don't know you and I have really no relationship with you and I can give you up and and stay out of jail, I'm going to do it and I don't really care. It is what it is. So I threw him under the bus. He didn't even really go to jail. He didn't really get in that much trouble. They raided his house. He had to pay some fines. Was on probation for like a year. Whatever. You knew what you were doing when you got into it, but I'm not going back to prison. So I took off and went on the run. They let me go that day. I went on the run. I took off and went up to Detroit. I hung out in Detroit for a few months and then went out to Nebraska, got caught. But when I got picked up out in Nebraska and went back and seen my judge, they just picked me up for absconding on probation. So I didn't even get charged with any of that. Like none of that even followed me to court. Like my judge didn't even know about any of that stuff that transpired, about the police coming to my house and the credit card, none of that even made it to court. They didn't even call my probation officer, which they lied to me and told me that they had to do, like, well, we have to contact your probation officer. It's a law. That's why I took off. Because I'm like, she's gonna violate me anyway, and I'm gonna end up back in jail. I'd rather take off, and you know what? You got to come find me. And that's been my attitude my whole life with everything. Like I will never turn myself in or like willingly go to jail. You're gonna have to come catch me. You know what I mean? So that's basically what happened. I took off when I didn't really have to. I could have just stayed but I was scared. I just got out of prison. I'm like, dude, I'm not going back. I wasn't ready to go back to prison right away. So I took off and like 6 months later, like I said, I got picked up and extradited and went back in front of the judge and all that stuff. Yeah. But like I said, it worked out in my favor because when I got out that time, I had no probation. And it's been 10 years. 2020, next year will be 10 years I've been out. And I haven't even had so much as a speeding ticket between then and now. Yeah.
During this whole time, how did your son feel? Like just going through all this.
Oh man, I didn't really have any contact with him. He didn't. I had no visits the whole time I was in prison. Nobody wrote me. I got no mail. I had no contact with his mother because when all this stuff went down in 2009, I believe, when the Secret Service came and raided my house, he was 2 years old. You know, so when I took off, my wife at that time, we weren't married, but we were together, and baby mama, if you want to say, she left me. She took off and didn't want to have anything to do with me. So I just didn't have a relationship with my son until after I got out of prison, and we started talking again because I was friends with my wife's sister before I even met her. That's how I met my wife, and then eventually had my son. Is I was friends with her sister because she was dating one of my friends. So her sister ended up reaching out to me, and then through her sister, I ended up reconnecting with my son. And we've never really had that conversation, to be honest with you. It's just one of those things where he understands, what happened. He's seen me on all the podcasts I've been on. I'm sure he's listened to them. And he understands, what the whole situation is. Uh, but we've never really had that conversation. You know, and I think that's probably why he's a little bit of a good kid. Maybe because he's seen that I was, getting jammed up and I spent a lot of time in jail and stuff, and maybe he didn't want to go that same direction.
Do you think because I know Cox wrote stories for a lot of guys, and it's
Hmm.
how he ended up basically turning his life around in the end, because he wrote a lot of stories in prison, and then that translated to him then starting the podcast and also writing books outside of prison. Um, and he also has the pop art too, but mainly the writing of the story. So
Hmm.
was Cox behind, you ultimately turning most of your life around?
Um, I think he would like to think so, maybe. You know what I mean? But really, it was just my decision. At the end of the day, I just was tired, and I realized that I'm getting older, and I don't want to be one of those guys that are 40, 50 years old sitting in federal prison having to restart their life when they get out. And I wanted better for myself. I wanted to do something with my life because this whole like my whole story, like the book, and then now it's hopefully being turned into a movie, and but that's it's whole another story in itself. That didn't even really start taking shape until the past few years, like the past maybe 3 or 4 years. So like the first 5 or 6 years, it was basically on me to decide, what path do you want to take? Do you want to keep doing fraud and go back to prison, or do you want to kind of figure something else out? And that's what I did. I just figured something else out. I got into tattooing. I've been tattooing since like 2002, 2003 or something like that, but I never took it serious. I never considered it as a career choice, as something that's going to pay my bills. But I was like, this is the skill that I have, so I have to kind of make this work for myself. You know, and so that's the path I decided to take. But ultimately, it was my decision. To not do fraud, to not party, to not do drugs, to not drink, and kind of just try and do the right thing. That was all me.
Going back to the money conversation now, what's
Mhm.
the most expensive thing you've ever bought? Just like with the ill-gotten gains.
I think the single most expensive purchase I made was probably I invested with a friend of mine into a private transportation service. So it was like $100,000, and they basically give you X amount of hours on a private jet, and you have a private number you call, and they'll pick you up wherever you are. A Lincoln Town car will come pick you up. They'll take you to the executive airport, and you get on a private jet, and they'll take you wherever you want to go. And me and a friend of mine both put up like 50 grand or something like that. And we just had access to a private plane whenever we wanted it to go wherever we wanted to go, pretty much. And I think that is the single largest purchase I ever made when spending money. Like I said, I wasn't a jewelry guy. You know, I had a nice Rolex, but I think I only spent maybe $6,000 on it. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like a $50,000 Rolex. It was like a $6,500 Rolex. I bought a lot of cars, but I never purchased a car like brand new off the lot with 0 miles. You know, I was into Cadillacs when I was younger, so I had a lot of nice Cadillacs. I had CTSs, STSs, um, you know, and I'm kind of a tech nerd, so I spent a lot of money on, like, you know, I always had the latest and greatest, you know, devices, you know, the gaming PC. I always had, like, you know, the nicest phone and the big screen TV with the surround system. You know, I spent a lot of money on that stuff. Yeah, but that 50,000 I dropped on that transportation service deal, I think was like the most I ever spent. And you got to realize, like, at the very pinnacle of what I deemed to be my success, I was doing 100 orders a month, it was $1,000 minimum order with me, and I was doing like 100 orders a month. So it's like $100,000 a month in sales. I was doing when I reached, you know, like the very pinnacle, when I was well known on the sites, I was well trusted. I would open my email every morning, and it would just be flooded with orders. You know, it would take me 2 days just to process the emails. It would take me 2 days, you know, because I didn't have anybody doing any of this with me. It was all me. Like, I was doing it all by myself. And I had when I went to prison, I had no co-conspirators on my case. You know, so it was just me. It was just me in a walk-in closet with 5 printers, 2 laptops, and a, you know, bunch of various other equipment. You know.
So ultimately, what was your goal? So when I ask that, there are many different things that, and this is also related to the money argument. So I remember I
Mhm.
was watching, because I did like a good amount of research before doing this of like how it actually works and like, you know, your interviews and stuff like that. And I
Mhm.
was watching a Vice documentary about, well, there's a few Vice documentaries about it, but there's one in particular
I've
with
seen them. Yeah.
with a British kid, where the kid's like probably not that much older than me, and he's talking about, you know, how he would buy Deliveroos and take girls out on like these really lavish dates. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I assume that he hasn't been caught, because otherwise Vice would have, you know, made another article about that. But,
Yeah.
you know, he would order on Deliver, basically like a teenager, you know, but like almost like a rap career like type of thing to buy. If you understand what I'm saying, like
Yes.
his focus is like just luxury, pleasure,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
not so much fame, but more just like, you know, having the women and then having the
Yeah.
watches. He's
The
bought Rolex.
lifestyle,
Yeah, the like
because that's what social media pushes now. It's like
right,
every time you open your phone or put on YouTube or anything, it's high rise mansions and
right.
Lamborghinis and jewelry. You know, so I could see why that's what his main focus was, because that's what you see. You know, back when I was doing this, like I said, I wasn't a partier. And I was in my mid 20s when I started this, and I had really gotten all the partying out of my system by the time I started making credit cards. You know, so I was like, my strip club phase was between like 21 and 25, where I was just in the strip club. I would go to the strip club. I'd be there for all 3 shifts. You know what I mean? I'd go there. I'd watch one shift of girls come in, go out, come in, go out. They would close the place down. They'd have to kick me out, and then I'd wait 3 hours for it to open back up, and I'd go back in. So I did that for years. I did the drinking, I did the partying, you know, and it was just like, so by the time when I started getting money, I was just over it, you know. And also I had a steady girlfriend at that time. Like, I was with her right before I started doing the fraud. Um, you know, and then my son came, so it was like I kind of had like the family unit kind of situation going on. So I wasn't really going crazy, you know what I mean? But the money was there, and my end goal, to get back to your original question, my end goal with all of this was $5 million. Once I reached $5 million, I was going to start like just a couple of small businesses, you know, maybe like a mobile detailing company. I was going to start a graphic design company and hire a few people, and, you know, start doing like mobile auto wraps, you know, and screen printing T-shirts and things like that. So I had an exit strategy. I just never made it that far. Yeah.
Well, I remember at one point in, I think it was one of your Danny Jones interviews. I don't know if you only did one, because I think I've seen the clips too. But with regards to one of them, I believe it was you. You mentioned about making 100,000, and then 100,000 be turning into 200,000, and then 200,000, 300,000, then 400,000. So, I mean, it's a lot of money. Like, it's a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with ultimately, why didn't you stop at like 4 million? Like, what would make the difference between 5 million and 4 million? Because after a while, money is like
Yeah.
kind of meaningless. Like in
Yeah.
those.
I think the number was just really arbitrary. The 5 mil, just they had a good ring to it, I guess. Because once you pass 1 million, once you pass 2 million, you get to three, you get to 3.5. I'm like, okay, five. That's my number. And it really, there was no reason why I said five. I was just like, five is my number. That's where I'm gonna stop. Because in my mind, if you have $5 million, you're rich. There's no need to do fraud anymore. Like even if I quit at 5 million and I never even opened any businesses or anything, I could probably live off that money for the next 20 or 30 years if I was smart with it. So I figured like, okay, I'm gonna buy a house somehow. I was aware of the IRS and not to get, and that was another thing. Like that's another reason why I never really spent a lot of the money. I think out of the $4.5 million I made, I didn't really spend that much because I watched people go to prison for going and buying a mansion when you have no means to purchase it. Like, people are going to start looking into your finances. And I was smart. I was actually smart enough to realize that. So it was like, I'm not going to be the guy wearing $1 million in jewelry pulling up into the apartment complex in a $250,000 foreign vehicle. Like I wasn't gonna be that guy that gets caught that way. So I was kind of scared to spend the money. I had a townhouse. I had vehicles, but like I said, they weren't brand new. So it was like, let me get the 5 million. Let me start a couple of small businesses. I'll purchase a house. I'll buy some land. And then I'll basically kind of just be able to live my life the way I want to live it. And that was the plan. But like I said, it just fell apart before then. Yeah, and it wasn't even really. I mean, I guess you could say it was my fault, but it was really just me being complacent.
So ultimately, this is something I've thought about, right? So
Mhm.
you're familiar with Breaking Bad, correct?
Yeah.
So Breaking Bad, whether it's Breaking Bad, which is like a famous fictional example, or like, we could talk about every drug dealer on the planet, basically. But there's many people that, like you, have this end goal of an exorbitant amount of money, but money that you can like live off or like buy a house or for your family, whatever.
Yeah.
So, when we're talking about people that ever have actually succeeded in that goal. So here's a funny story. So I knew a girl.
Mhm.
I mean, I still know her, but this girl, she was telling me the story about how her uncle was a drug dealer who had basically made so much money that he eventually was neighbors with Eminem. Like he bought like this $11 million house, all this money. Eventually, he got caught. But um, my point with telling that story is, once you buy the house, like to be neighbors with Eminem and all this, like or you get the example of Breaking Bad where he makes well over enough money for him and his family for, you know, Skylar, I think, says it in the show where she's like, this is more money than we could ever spend in like 10 lifetimes. Like what?
Yeah. How big does this pile need to be?
Right.
Basically.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah. So my question is, have you ever heard of anybody being truly successful in sort of their plan, like the exit strategy? Because
Well, see,
yeah.
that's the thing is you don't hear about those people because they
Well,
don't
how
get
would
caught.
you know? How would you know?
Exactly. They get their money and they quietly, and I'm sure they exist. I'm sure there are people out there who made millions in the 80s during the drug trade, and just walked away. But it's like you don't they're not going to willingly tell their story on a podcast. You know what I mean? And unless you personally know them or know somebody who knows them, you're never going to hear those stories, unfortunately. You know?
Well, even if you did know somebody who knew them, because I thought about it, because like Cox, like take how Cox was caught. Like Cox
Yeah.
was caught through his wife, girlfriend at the time.
A series of unfortunate events, yeah,
Yeah,
dealing with women. That's
yes.
his biggest downfall, yeah, is women.
Well, I mean, you could argue it's also his pride, at the end of
The
it, because
ego, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because I mean, like, I've never actually known what he spent his money on. Like, do you know? Because like I wanted to ask
Uh
him that. I never
yeah.
did.
And that's a real head scratcher for me too, because He's never drank a drop of alcohol in his entire life. He's never smoked weed or done any drugs.
Never done drugs. I know
No,
that for a fact.
he wasn't a flashy guy, so he wasn't in Lamborghinis and Ferraris. He didn't have a mansion. I know he did a lot of traveling. I think he did a lot of stuff going to Europe and traveling around. And I know art was a big thing for him. We probably spent a lot of money on art. But it's a real head scratcher for me as well. I don't know where any of that money went.
Because because he stole like significantly more money than you. Like
Yeah,
he was stealing like houses and then transferring those houses into like eventually $55 million that we know of. Like the
yeah,
FBI just estimated $55 million. He could have stolen more than that he
yeah.
could have gotten away with. Like that wasn't even in the charges. I don't know. Like, is it possible? Sure, but like let's say $55 million. I don't know what he spent all that money on. I
I
really
don't. Yeah, I don't know either. I don't think he spent a lot. A lot of it, I think, went unspent. To be honest with you, I know a lot of it just was in bank accounts. Sometimes he would lose, or he would get, they'd be right on his tail, and he'd have to go to a different part of the country and have to leave behind, you know, cash or money in bank accounts. Um, yeah, but I don't know either. I don't know where all that money went.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I'll have to talk to him again. It's been a while since we've talked, so that would give me a good excuse. But
Yeah,
anyways,
I'm sitting in his studio right now. I see him every day.
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Um, I guess whenever you get the chance, you got to ask him. I'd be like, dude, where did you actually put your money? Because I've never heard it on podcasts either. Like, I've never heard somebody actually ask him the question outright. I'm like, what did you spend this money on?
Yeah.
It's very vague, like general answers of like, I feel like he used all of his money for like a stepping stone of like, because I know he did put like 70 grand in cash one time and stuff.
And he was renovating a lot of these properties as well. So he wouldn't just buy a house and then do a bunch of silly stuff with the paperwork because we'd have to have appraisers come out and look at the property and appraise it. So, I think he was dumping a lot of money into these properties as well. He had other investment properties that he was dumping money into. So honestly, I think a lot of the capital went towards those kinds of situations.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that actually probably would be where, because his process of like doing his frauds was way more sophisticated than I even care to memorize or know.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like yours was pretty simple. It's just, I get the credit card information, or, I sell materials to put in credit card information onto, and then that's the end.
Yeah,
Like,
I created a product that was marketable, and that was it. And the rest was marketing after that. And I'm a marketing genius. And honestly, a lot of it was customer service. And I believe that 90% of my success, the reason I made as much money as I did and went as far as I did, was because I had impeccable customer service. I used to sleep with my laptop next to my bed open with the volume up because a lot of the people I were dealing with were on the other side of the world. They were in South America, they were in Russia, so there was different time zones. So if I would sell a batch of cars to somebody, and at my time, 3 in the morning was like 3 in the afternoon for them, and they had a problem and they needed cars replaced, and they hit me, I would wake up out of a dead sleep and I would deal with whatever issue was going on, print the cars out the next day, and send them out. I never kept anybody waiting after they paid for their product. I fixed any problem and replaced any cars that had any issues with. So my customer service, I think, like I said, had a lot to do with my success. I think, because listen, when I started purchasing cards from people online, it was the wild wild west. Nobody was dependable. Half the time, your shit didn't even show up in the mail. You didn't get it. They would just rob you. You would send the money on Monday, and then they wouldn't email you until Thursday, telling you that, oh, your stuff's on the way. Like you know what I mean? Like nobody took pride in anything they were doing. Like they didn't care. They didn't treat it like a legitimate business. And that's what I did. Is I took what everybody else was doing wrong. I made all of those changes, and I created a simple business model and good customer service, believe it or not.
well, I mean, it's an interesting question though, of like, once you make the money, where do you put it? And I feel like it's also a staple of uh I don't know if it's like because I had a conversation with like my aunt, and I'm like, why does it feel like it's almost like a Western thing? Like people make a lot of money either through the lottery, or like you get a Jordan Belfort, or you get
Mhm.
um who like spends like all these millions of dollars in stock fraud on, you know, coke, strippers, and whatever.
Right.
And then like I feel like that's not. I feel like that's. I don't want to say that's only an American thing, because I feel like it does happen other places. Like Escobar did it too, but I feel like,
Well, I think a lot of it boils down to the individual,
yeah,
you know, and you have to look at the type of individual who's willing to commit fraud on a massive scale. There's gonna be some other issues going on in their life. You know what I mean? Like they're not just your straight and narrow librarians that are committing fraud to pay, you know, grandmother's hospital bills. You know, these are you know, most people who what do I want to say, partake in risky and in behavior, like I said, are going to have, you know, mostly like they're going to have drug problems. They're going to have self-control problems. They're going to have problems where, you know, where they're just sleeping with 100 women every day. You know, it's those personality types that are more willing to engage in high risk behavior when it comes to fraud. So I think, like you said, a lot of it just boils down to the individual. You know, when they get all this money, then it's like whoever they are, it doesn't change you. And I was having this conversation with somebody a little while ago. Money doesn't change who you are. It just amplifies whoever you are inside. Like it takes whoever you are and cranks the volume up 100%. Because now you have the resources to live out whatever craziness is going on inside of your head, whereas before you didn't. You
well,
know?
what it really does is it magnifies your insecurities. So,
Yes.
so you know, we could. That's a whole nother. That's like a whole psychology debate. And I do want to talk to
Right.
you, because the show is like, you know, I do want to. I do want to end. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about the show too.
Sure.
And I thought this was a really good interview. But I was gonna say that, you know, when it comes to like when people take the lottery, for example, when most people win the lottery, they lose it in like no time. Like they get $20 million, and
Yeah.
it's always some like, you know, I don't want to be that guy who's like stereotyping people that are, you know, winning the lottery, but it's, you know, it's always like the most hillbilly, you know, person.
But those are the people who play
Yeah,
the lottery.
right. And
You know what I mean?
yeah, and then they go out and they buy like champagne, and then they buy like
Yeah.
20 grand parties, and you
Yeah.
know,
It's
it's kind of
gone.
it's gone. So
Yeah.
it's gone before they got it,
You
and
ever see
it's
that show, The Lottery Ruined My Life?
I've heard of it. I've probably
It's
seen an
good.
episode.
If you go
Yeah.
online and watch a couple of those episodes, it's really good. I mean,
Well,
these people are morons. These people are morons. I mean, they'll go
right.
out, they'll go with $10 million in the lottery. They'll get like $4 million, and $3 million they'll buy a house. And they'll spend the other $2 million on cars. And a year later, they don't realize that you've got all your bills are gonna, you know what I mean? Like it's crazy, but it's like they didn't have money when they started. You know, they were dollar dumb. I hate to use that term, but I was dollar dumb. If I would have been dollar smart when I had all that money, I would have invested. I would have bought Bitcoin. I would have, I would have went and did something with the money, but I was dollar dumb. I didn't come from money. Like my parents were I didn't grow up in poverty, but my parents were working class. You know, they believe that you just go, you work a job, you put your 40 hours in, you pay your bills, and that's just how life was. You know, so those were the values that I was instilled with growing up, you know, and it wasn't like I didn't have the entrepreneur mindset. None of my family has the entrepreneur mindset where like we'd rather start a business and, you know, employ people and make money that way than work for someone else. You know, so like I said, a lot of these people who win the lottery, they're just hourly wage workers who get this giant windfall, and have absolutely no idea how to manage it. You know, unfortunately.
Hey man, it's a story as old as time. Man gets
Yeah,
everything he
yeah,
could ever want, and then he loses it all.
that's it.
Um,
Yeah,
it's a shame too. I remember I was
yeah,
watching this episode of American Greed, and I'm going to end off with this story. Actually, I'm going to end off this story, and then I'm going to ask you one question. That's going to be it.
sure.
But I was going to say I remember watching an episode of American Greed where the guy I guess he owned his own credit card company, or he owned like a loan company for a credit card.
Mhm.
Whatever he did, basically he made it so that like on paper everything would balance out in the books for the banks and the credit card company. And he basically committed like, I don't know however many millions of dollars he spent, but he bought a house, and then he bought like what did he buy? He bought like 3 Rolls Royces. And then yeah, like, and then and you know what? I thought about it. Like, why would you spend it on 3 Rolls Royces? How
So
many
crazy.
after? But it's you have to know the meaning of the word enough.
Yes. Yeah.
But my last question would just be, do you have any advice for young people?
Oh man, the amount of resources available to today's young people that wasn't available to me 20 years ago is night and day. So there's whatever you want to do, whatever avenue you want to take in this world to be successful, there are just such an abundant amount of resources to learn from, and to help you further and better all of your skills. So just think twice about everything you do. Think everything through all the way to the end, like a chess game. Just try and run simulations inside of your head, and if A, B, and C happen, what's D, E, and F going to be? And that really is my best advice, is just think about everything you're going to do, figure out what direction you want to go in life. And like I said, there's so many resources. There's no excuse nowadays to not be successful, in my opinion. Especially like I said, with all of the resources available today.
All right, man. Well, it was great getting to talk to you on the interview, and I appreciate you coming along and doing this.
Oh, no problem, brother. It's been a while since I've done a pod, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm going to stop the recording. We'll talk a little bit after the show. All right.
Yeah.
In 3, 2, 1.